for the second. India have won the test match. India have won the series.
They're going to get back for two. India home. Lords goes wild.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the 81 All Out podcast. This is your host, Siddhartha Vaidyanathan, and I'm thrilled to begin the show with an announcement about a book that we have republished at 81 All Out. As many of you know, late last year, we bought the distribution rights to Mike Marquis's book, War Minus the Shooting, a classic cricket book about the 1996 World Cup, and we published a paperback and electronic version. We've been so thrilled by the response from our listeners and readers, and it spurred us to look for other cricket classics that have been out of print. So today, I'm happy to announce the second book from 81 All Out Publishing, which is Cricket Beyond the Bazaar by Mike Coward. This book was first published in 1990, and it's a wonderful mix of memoir, travelogue, history, journalism, and it explores Australian cricket's relationship with the Indian subcontinent, largely in the 1980s, but also goes back to the 30s and 50s and 60s, and is a wonderful study of history. So this is wonderful news, and I'll link to where you can buy the book and how you can get hold of it. But let me get to the guests for today's show. The first is the author of the book himself, Mike Coward, who has been on the show before, but today he's here to talk about his book that we are privileged to republish. Thanks so much for joining again, Mike.
Sid, it's good to be with you. Very good to be with you, and I'm very grateful that you're going to republish Cricket Beyond the Bazaar, because it's, of all the work I've done, this is my real favourite.
Absolutely honoured to be republishing it. Thank you so much for trusting 81 All Out and trusting me to hand over the rights. Mike's book highlights the achievements of several cricketers, many of whom are Australian cricketers, but there's little doubt, at least in my mind, that the hero of the book is somebody who played a small matter of 156 tests for Australia, scored a small matter of 11,174 runs, won a World Cup, and is remembered as one of the finest captains and one of the finest cricketers in world cricket, Allan Border. And it gives me great pleasure to have AB join us today on this very special occasion. So welcome to the show, AB. Thank you so much.
Sid, not a problem at all. Looking forward to our chat about some pleasant memories of playing cricket in India and visiting that country on more than several occasions, lots of occasions, and such a great time had by all. So it'd be good fun reminiscing.
Absolutely, and I've read out AB's overall stats for Australia, but also importantly, and with regard to this book, AB played 22 tests in India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, and averaged close to 55 with 600s. He has a really, really big fan following in India, and I must tell you that as somebody who has who knows many people in Chennai or Madras, as it was before, Allan Border is a living deity there. So this is a great honor for me to have you on the show. Mike, maybe you can start with the book. It was published in 1990. Maybe you can tell us a bit about the impetus to write it, and also your your great love for the subcontinent that you developed over the years.
Sid, thank you. Yes, I mean, the motivation really was, in many ways, was just anger at the indifference the Australian community was showing to cricket anywhere but in England. There was a real sense of out of sight, out of mind, and it affected. It made me so angry, particularly in 1986 at the Tide Test, and in 1987 there was virtually no media interest in what was going on. I mean, 86, the Tide Test match, I mean, what was it, just the second tie in 1,052 Test matches or something around that figure. And then 87, the World Cup, when they were just defying the odds. And this was Allan Border's, particularly his moment in the sun after striving for so many years to restore the image of Australian cricket on the world stage. And there'd been this overwhelming indifference to what had been achieved. And it just made me very angry that Australian cricket was so Anglo-centric still in the 1980s. And that's what prompted me. And it was published, of course, in 1990. So it was a little bit of, yes, I was off my long run a little bit because of my disappointment with the way that part of the world was being treated. And particularly AB, who's perhaps the greatest Australian player ever on the subcontinent, averages nearly over 56, I think, in all achievements throughout all his tours. And it was just a disservice to him. It was a disservice to Australian cricket, and the wrongs needed to be righted. And I thought I would do it with this book.
Absolutely. Though I must assure readers that the anger comes through so well channeled in terms of love and history and journalism. So it's not like you would be reading angry sentence after angry sentence, but you would be reading a great bit of erudition in the book. Which brings me to AB. Maybe you could take us through your early tours and your impressions of the subcontinent that you had. And there was quite a bit of a stereotype about it being like a hardship posting, wasn't it? And some great Australian cricketers didn't even go there through their careers.
Yeah, very much so. My first tour was 1979, as Michael will remember, and it was a serious eye-opener for all of us because we just hadn't confronted that sort of population. People living on the streets, just the difference to what you'd expect, in our upbringing in Australia. Just the sights and sounds were just totally foreign to us. We'd sort of heard all these horror stories about, travelling to India and how crook we were going to get, and be careful with the food and the water, and it was basically, we were, very gun shy, getting off the plane. I forget whether it was Mumbai, it was our first stop. I think it was Chennai was our first stop. And just the sights and sounds were just totally foreign to us. In this day and age with the social media and the ability to just sort of, check out things. If you're going to go to Kathmandu, I mean, you can check things out. No end, can't you, as to what to expect when you get to that part of the world. But back in 1979, you just went on what past players talked about, and everything was very much in a negative about your experiences that you're going to confront you when you got to somewhere like India. So we were sort of negative mindset, I suppose, from the start, but it soon turned around, trust me. It didn't take long for us to really think, well, hang on, this is a pretty good spot. Okay, the odd person is getting a bit crook, but that happens to foreigners when they come to Australia, different enzymes in water and all the rest of those medical things that happen to your stomach when you do travel. But we soon overcame all those issues and end up having a most fantastic time. We were in India for, I think it was best part of 3 months, 6 test matches, no one-day cricket played in those days. So it was, test match, up-country matches, travelling around, the ability to go into town, to check out the local bazaars, and it was just an incredible eye-opener for us all. But one of the great experiences, I've got to say. Great learning curve for me personally, as far as my cricket was concerned. Batting on those sort of subcontinent wickets did suit my game against not always the turning ball, but some of the tracks were very good to bat on. You got good value for your shots with the fast outfields. So I enjoyed my time as a cricketer in India right from the get-go, and it hasn't dulled since. I'm a tap on the head to go back to India anytime you like. I really enjoy myself there.
One point I wanted to ask you, though, AB, is that over the years, there's been a lot of emphasis on how Australian cricketers need to prepare for tours to India. There have been stories of Matthew Hayden coming to India and practicing and then having great success there. But back when you were playing and when you came first, how would you prepare for such a tour? Because you had such great success in the subcontinent, despite playing, perhaps not having the experience of playing on turning pitches back home. So what was that like?
In Australia, we did have a variety of pitches. Yes, they tended to be on the harder, faster type surface, but we had surfaces in Melbourne that would vary from year to year. So through the Sheffield Shield program, you got to play in those sort of pitches in Melbourne and in Sydney. That in my early days was very much a turning pitch. So you did have some knowledge and experience of playing against reasonable quality spinners when the ball was turning, particularly late on, say day 3, day 4 type pitches in Australia. Not in Brisbane and Perth, of course, but yeah, the variety of pitches did serve us reasonably well as far as preparation for that particular tour in '79. It's changed a little bit now, where our pitches have become a little bit very, very different, very similar. A lot of drop-in pitches, so the variety of around the states isn't quite the same as it used to be. But I don't think we were too far behind the 8 ball as far as the pitches were concerned. I mean, my recollection of the pitches in India in '79 were that they were very good batting pitches for the best part of 2-3 days. Then the deterioration would start, and yes, if you found yourself batting late-ish on day 5, it was very, very, very difficult if in fact the game went that far. But generally speaking, the games did tend to go later into the day 4, day 5 on those pitches, and sometimes the ball didn't start turning much at all, and you had a lot more drawn test matches in the subcontinent. But my recollections are that we weren't too far behind the 8 ball as far as our preparation. Once we got to India, yes, the heat, well, we were used to that. The pitches were very good. It was more just getting used to the noise, the sounds, the food,
culture,
just the population, just the different culture that you're confronted with. That was the harder part rather than the actual cricket preparation part.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. In your book, you talk about that famous line about to lose patience is to lose the battle, and how that became a motto for so many Australian teams going forward. And also, you talk about the 1984 trip, which was all one-day matches, that Australia ended up actually winning that series, and how that the team led, I think, by Kim Hughes, if I'm not mistaken, that particular team had a big sort of role to play in terms of the mental shift. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, yes, it was. There was the Golden Jubilee of the Ranji Trophy in '84, the celebration. Yes, I don't know. It'd be interesting to talk to AB about that, whether it had any really big impact. But certainly the fact that they won was an achievement. And I think that helped in terms of the mindset. There were some fairly extraordinary achievements on that tour, not the least being Greg Ritchie hijacking a bus in Indore, as AB would recall, among others, an extraordinary carry-on, which tested the relationship with manager and players, which is often tested, of course, in India. But, I mean, I think that the key aspect out of that were two things. One, it showed that they had the ability to win in the short form, the ability just to win in India. And also it was a mark of respect for the tradition of the game. And that's where the irony comes. And this is where I believe that the international cricket community has lost its sense of direction and the devaluation of history and tradition. So you're celebrating the golden jubilee of the Ranji Trophy, one of the great domestic trophies, first-class trophies in the world. And how do you celebrate it? By playing a series of meaningless one-day games. And that has been the attitude of the international cricket community for a long time. I mean, it's cheap. It's cheap. It cheapened what the Ranji Trophy represented, one of the great first-class trophies in world cricket, named after one of the greatest of all cricketers. And to me, looking back now, it was just indicative of the way the game was evolving and the devaluation of history and tradition. A one-off test match would have been a far more appropriate way. But of course, the boards do their deals and they, one has to favour the other, and that is passed down the track and one thing other. I mean, we still owe some countries one-day games in recent years because programs couldn't be completed. But they were the key things, that it was showing respect to India, recognising the great relationship between the two countries that started in 35-36, and suddenly it showed they had the ability to win.
AB, any memories of that tour or Greg Ritchie or anything else?
Well, being terrified by Greg Ritchie's driving, particularly, it's not as if he's going down the M1. Is it the highways in India? There's maybe 6 lane official lanes, but there's probably more closer to 14 or 15 actual lanes travelling along the road in that country. So it was a terrifying experience having Greg Ritchie, and his use of the horn. He got very used to that. That's something in Australia we don't do very much of. Honk the horn, whereas in India it's like a regulation, isn't it? Every about 30 seconds or more likely to be every 10 seconds there's the honk of the horn. But the actual cricket side of the equation, as Michael said, I hadn't sort of thought about it in those terms, to be honest, to this day, where the Ranji Trophy is it's like celebrating 100 years of the Sheffield Shield with a couple of 2020 games, isn't it?
Exactly.
It doesn't sort of ring true. I hadn't sort of really thought of it along those lines, Michael. It's interesting that we played a one-day series, but the relationship was built. I mean, in those early days, obviously, you go back into the 30s when we first played against India. Yes, there was a relationship started, but it really it didn't really start to solidify, I don't think, until 79, and then the follow-up series subsequently from 79 to this day. That relationship, I think, probably started more closely around that time. So 84 was once again just Australia going to India, experiencing the Indian culture once more. We're far more used to what we're being confronted with cricketing wise and just general living. From that point of view, it was a fantastic tour. We played a really good brand of cricket. We had a good cricket team getting better and better all the time after the retirements of 3 or 4 great players all at once. I mean, we were starting to fill the gaps nicely from my recollections of 84. We had a good cricket team together and starting to do some good things. So pleasant memories of that tour, because I don't think I'd had a lot of success in the subcontinent up until that point anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Though in 79, I think Chennai, Madras Test was good for you in terms of
on a personal level, more in a team sense that
team sense,
we were going to India, but we enjoying ourselves, but not getting the results.
Absolutely.
And personally, I always enjoyed playing in India, varying results, but generally speaking, overall, I have to say I enjoyed my time in the subcontinent.
Absolutely, which then sort of makes me forward 2 more years to 86, of course, which is like the signature chapter in Mike's book. The first chapter, it's one of the sort of the big chapter, and definitely the best I've read anyone write about that famous tied test. Absolutely marvelous chapter. And so, yes, I wanted to ask you about the lead up to that. You spent, the time in Madras, as it was called back then, getting used to the conditions, getting used to the heat, and then playing that test, those 5 days, a tie in hell, as Mike calls that chapter, because of the conditions that you had to endure. The team and you and the team particularly seemed to become extremely fond of Madras by the end of that, and which of course had an effect on the 1987 World Cup as well, which we'll come to. But yeah, talk a bit about '86.
Yeah, well, we'd spent a lot of time in Chennai, Madras, a good build-up for that Test match, and so we were very used to. Well, when you say used to the conditions, we knew what to expect, but that particular match just it seemed to add an extra 5 or 10 degrees for some reason, just in that little period. That we were playing that game of cricket, it just seemed to become hotter, more humid, and just the conditions just more difficult. Whether it was just the tension of the cricket, I'm not 100% sure, but it certainly all the players, even the Indian boys, suffered, dehydration and all those sort of things that we didn't know much about. I've got to admit. In those days, how important your fluid intake is. We tended to just drink when we got thirsty, which was pretty regularly in that particular game. But it was just one of those brilliant games of cricket. I mean, it just evolved. It was one of those a slow burn, if you like, to that crescendo. Those final moments on late on day 5. Quite incredible. It's just a sad it hasn't been captured more significantly on television. I think that's one of our great regrets, isn't it, Michael, that we haven't got better vision of that particular, the game as a whole, but just that chaotic finish. It was just remarkable. It'd be highlight reels all the time if you had the chance to see some really good footage of that game.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the real sadness of that, the indifference shown to it by everybody, and particularly there was a little bit of footage that the Hindu newspaper produced at one stage, and I can remember doing a couple of interviews. And I think Ramaswamy Mohan from the Hindu might have spoken to Kapil Dev. But yes, you're right. I mean, there was basically nothing.
Doordarshan. Is it Doordarshan?
Yeah. Distant vision. And it was, and that is a sadness. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And that indifference that we talked about earlier continued, of course, into the World Cup, the media indifference into the World Cup the following year. Sid, what I should point out at this point, of course, is what the pressure that was on Allan was enormous. I'll just read that pertinent thing. I said he was haunted, this is AB, was haunted by a catalogue of catastrophes. This is going into the Test match. Australia had lost 12 and won 3 of their previous 24 Test matches, had been unable to win a home test away from the Sydney Cricket Ground for 34 months, had lost 5 and drawn 1 of 6 series since Greg Chappell, Dennis Lee and Rod Marsh retired at the close of 83-84, had won only 1 away series since 1976-7, if indeed a 2-match exchange with New Zealand constitutes a series, and most damning of all, had won just 6 and lost 23 of 49 overseas Test matches since January 1977. So when you consider that, and of course that was the year of 77 was the year of the apocalypse, as we say, with World Series cricket. I mean, what Allan had to confront then. So you can understand, I can remember clearly this press conference going into the Tide Test, how tense he was. And of course, we can't forget that he'd come out of a series in New Zealand earlier in the year, in 86, when he had threatened to stand down because of there was not the support for him that he was entitled to. I mean, it was an incredibly tense time in Australian cricket, a real evolution. And Allan had been nominated to be the man to lead Australia out of the wilderness. And I believe that no single cricketer has been asked to do more, because for a long time he didn't have any support at all. And he did it alone. And so those figures are absolutely damning what he had to do. So to say that he was a little bit tense on the last day in Chennai when victory was a chance after a couple of declarations to boot, I think it's something of an understatement.
Yes, I must admit I was very tense, because I was just talking about, or thinking about, there's just absolutely no justice in this game. How you can maybe declare twice, score 574 in your first innings, and still be on the cusp of losing that game. It was quite an amazing sort of emotions sort of come to your mind. In those sort of times, you sort of wonder why you'd start thinking like that rather than like get the game won sort of thing. I suppose the previous couple of years had sort of tainted my thinking.
Exactly.
Going in those last sort of half an hour or so.
Did Booney give you a bit of a reminder?
Yeah, my vice captain was ever present. He did a good job keeping me as calm as possible, because it's amazing. I mean, the over rate had slowed to a dawdle, hadn't it? But it was in those days where you had to bowl 20 overs in the last hour of the day anyway, and there was bright sunshine. There was no real issues, but I suppose the umpires, we're looking at we weren't time wasting. It was just because the game was getting so tense that we were making sure that we had the right field to the right bowler to the and all the different scenarios that you play out. It feels like you're rushing things out in the middle, but when you're actually sitting there watching it, it's grinding to a bit of a halt. But the umpire told me to sort of quicken the game up. You're dawdling. And I didn't take too kindly to that request. And luckily, David Boone was there on hand to sort of calm things down a bit, because I think the umpire did actually threaten to send me off. And my reaction was, well, you can't send me off. And then, of course,
then you said maybe.
Maybe you can. I don't know. Is this football? I'm not sure what the rules are. So I did actually calm down a little bit at that moment. But it was just a wonderful game of cricket. I mean, everyone was under pressure, including the umpires. You do forget about them at times, don't you? About them making crucial decisions at an incredibly tense moment. So we were all feeling it, that's for sure. But it was just a great end to a great Test match. And at the end of the day, you've got to congratulate both sides. India for keeping going, chasing the target, and for us declaring on the morning of the day 5 to sort of set the game up. So it was, no one really deserved to lose, and it was probably the fairest possible result.
Absolutely. And at the end of that chapter, Mike, you quote Bobby Simpson, who says it was perhaps the toughest Test match ever played. And it strikes me that even though we might get another tight test or few more tight tests, because it is of course possible, we may never get a test with those kind of conditions now, because today, if somebody is throwing up and urinating, they're not going to be out there in the middle. They're going to be, they're going to be taken away. They're going to be, and then you have concussion substitutes and things these days. So things are very different. I mean, unfortunately, of course, talking about throwing up, unfortunately, we don't have Dino with us today. Such a tragedy to lose him so early. But there's the bits about Dino in that chapter just strikes me that would perhaps not happen at all to any cricketer today. Don't you agree?
No,
I'd probably be in jail for attempted murder because Jones was so badly dehydrated. But of course, I didn't know anything about dehydration. I just thought, he was being a bit of a sook, get on with it, trying to keep him out there because he was batting so well. But I think in this day and age, not allowing him to go off the ground because he was wanted to drink and he was so badly dehydrated. I mean, imagine if he'd passed at that point. I would have been in all sorts of strife in today's cricket.
That would have been tragedy.
And your sledge about get someone tough, get a Queenslander out here. Honestly, it was outrageous, particularly for New South Welshmen.
former New South Welshman, thank you. Go the Maroons.
Yes, it was a big win.
Yes.
And Mike, for you, sitting in the press box, because back then you would have had the open press box sitting there, so you too would have felt how difficult it was. Of course, the players out there would have had it 100 times harder, but you would have experienced some fraction of the discomfort yourself.
Just more than a fraction, I can assure you. It was pretty solid, working particularly with thermal paper on a typewriter with the sweat pouring off onto the thermal paper, and suddenly the pearls have disappeared in front of you before you can even get a copy boy to take it down under the stand to the teleprinter. I mean, it's astonishing when you think about it. If I was to talk to any young journalist today about how we communicated that, not a soul would you believe you. No, it was tough. Of course it was tough, but it was tough for us. It was tough for the players, but we're all a part of something very, very special, something magical, really. It was tough in the sense that the players also, and I know AB was very sick at the end of the game when they had to go straight on the plane. They held the plane at the airport I think old Charlie Pinto, AB, was doing the job very cleverly.
Yes.
Keeping everything together. The plane was held for an hour and a half before to go to Hyderabad for the one-day international, where we all got caught in the middle of a lathi charge at Hyderabad. All these memories come flooding back. But I know AB was very sick that night, and that would be as much as anything as the release of the tension from not only just from that game, but from the build-up over a period of years, and particularly from that ill-fated New Zealand tour, the previous overseas tour. So, yeah, it was tough, but it was unforgettable. And here we are now, 34, 35 years or whatever it is now on, talking with such animation and excitement because it was so special.
Absolutely. And yes, go ahead, maybe.
Oh no, I was just saying it's just one of the great games of cricket. Whether you can reproduce that quality of cricket in those conditions like was played, I mean, it's hard to imagine another game being quite like it. But it was special. It does live with us, that's for sure. You just every now and then you might be talking to whoever, Marsh, Boone, whoever, and you do recollect that particular game quite often in our conversations. So that is, it's held very, very dear to our heart. That we were able to play in that game and produce that result.
Yeah, perhaps the only time when the heat was so intense and the humidity was so much, and yet you had a bowler wearing two jumpers on there. Greg Matthews.
Greg Matthews. I mean, and we sometimes forget what his contribution. I mean, he can be a bit strange, as we know. Two jumpers in those conditions, but he was fielding down in the shade, he reckons. So, go figure. But he got 10 wickets in that match, which is quite an extraordinary performance, given it was very, very much a batsman-dominated game. 10 wickets, and the vital last one. That's special. So he deserves a huge tick. I mean, Jonesy is remembered because of the double hundred and what he went through to get those runs. But Greg's performance was pretty special as well.
I tell you, the other thing that was we tend to forget sometimes was Jones's catch to get rid of Gavaskar in the second innings. I don't think I've ever seen anybody square driving quite against Billy McDermott. Some of the shots Gavaskar was playing down on one knee in the second innings was just astonishing. And then he took that catch. I think, what did he get? 90, didn't he?
Yeah, it was 90.
Yeah.
He got 90.
Spot on, I think, yeah.
And it was just, I mean, of all the superb batting, I mean, your 100, did you get missed on naught again, as you always do at Chennai?
I did get dropped on 0, yes. Had that slice of fortune.
And Booney played beautifully. And
Kapil Dev had 100. Yeah.
Kapil's 100 was stunning as well.
And a very good 100, because if we'd been able to make India follow on, might have been a very different result, obviously. He got India past the follow-on mark, and then, of course, then it was up to us to try and sort of build a lead to make a decision whether we could declare or not. So, that was a vital innings. So, lots of real fantastic batting performances. And you forget that there's bowlers out there toiling pretty hard in those conditions, and Greg did a great job. So he deserves as much accolade as anyone.
Yeah, so that match, that test was a tie, and then the rest of the series was drawn as well. But then it's amazing what an impact that one test can have, because in '87 you come back to Madras, you spend that time before the World Cup there, again getting ready for it, and then you play the India in the first match there, which is again a thriller of a game, which you win by one run. But then you sort of take off from there. It's like the momentum starts building, and then an unfancied side back then goes on and wins the World Cup.
Yeah, who would have thought? I suppose the injection of Bob Simpson, what he brought to the table, not everyone's favourite. His job wasn't to be popular, everyone's best buddy, but his job was to be the Sergeant Major and to give me an opportunity to sort of do what I need to do as a captain on the field, a little bit off field, obviously, but it was good to have that real hard-nosed, hard-edged person in charge of the preparations and the disciplinary type scenario that occasionally is required. We're all big boys, but they sometimes do some silly things, and it was good to have that sort of person involved. That really helped me out enormously as far as taking a bit of the pressure out of the scenario of the captaincy, sort of all encompassing. Where you had to sort of basically do most of the day-to-day sort of work, rather than just captain the side. So the support wasn't there until Bob really came on the scene. So that really helped in our preparations, because we were relentless in our pursuit of that field. We knew we had to be better than the others in fielding, because we weren't as good as other teams in the batting and bowling side of the equation. So there was just little things that we did extras on, and fielding, and a few little basic tactics that we employed. And as you said, that first game against India, another thriller. And I don't know whether, Michael, did you mention Cromo's role in the book? I think you have.
Yes, he does.
Yes.
Which is quite extraordinary when I tell people to this day, how I can't ever think of another circumstance where that's happened, where a score has been changed after the last ball's been bowled. It's 10, 15 minutes later, there's an extra 2 runs added to a team's score. I can't ever remember that happening before.
No, certainly not documented. You don't think Ravi was having us on a tad at the time?
He might have been, but remember, it was just a white chalk line. There was no ropes in those days. It was just a white chalk line. And Ravi, I mean, he mightn't have been, he might have been disappointed he missed the catch, but it did go over his head. And he's a big, tall dude, isn't he? So, but it did clearly go over the boundary line.
Yeah.
So that was the start of the scenario, and of course Cromo's involvement going up to see the match referee and having the score changed from, what was it, 272 to 274. I must admit,
Something like that. Yeah. Was David Shepherd was umpire?
I think he was, wasn't he?
I think it was.
You're testing my memories out here.
Yeah, no, me too. But I think it was Shepherd. Which probably made it a bit more manageable for an Australian manager.
Yes.
If it had been Vikram Raju or one of the crew,
Dara Dotiwala.
Dara Dotiwala, AB's old mate. It might have been workshopped a little bit longer, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, it's quite extraordinary at the time. When you add 2 runs to your total, you don't realise the ramifications later on in the game. But it's quite extraordinary when your score gets added by 2 runs and you win the game by 1. That's a pretty important moment.
Yes,
absolutely.
As management interventions go, it's
as good. Extraordinary. As I said, I don't think I've ever heard of it before or since. A scoreboard changed like that in a World Cup fixture in particular, and we win the game by 1 run, and the first game of the World Cup. So the momentum we got from that performance was just quite extraordinary. I mean, we celebrated like we won the thing. Probably about 3 weeks prematurely.
It should be said too, while you mentioned Alan Crompton, who died very recently, that his contribution was very significant in helping with the attitude to support you and Simo with your attitude to the subcontinent, because he was very positive about cricket in our part of the world. And one little thing he did, was not so little, was rather than have team photographs taken in the garden of these luxury hotels in which you were staying, he would take you out to the great monuments of India and have you photographed outside the Red Fort or outside the Taj Mahal or something like that. And I thought that was a very significant shift in attitude at the administration level.
Oh, yeah, he is a wonderful man, Michael, as you know, and tremendous manager in that sort of way that he, just a softly spoken, disciplined way that he went about his role as the manager. And as you said, just the little things that he did. I mean, just getting baggage and stuff around's quite, incredible sort of feat in itself, let alone getting all the players, from A to B and all those little hard work things that no one ever sees, that Cromo brought to the table, and in a very unfussed sort of way, wasn't it? He was just a great administrator, and a very, as you said, he loved the subcontinent, and we'd have team photos. I mean, and they take pride in place, don't they? On your wall, where you've got the Taj Mahal in the background of the Australian cricket team, it's special, and you don't. At the time, you're probably not thinking along those lines, but now you think, oh, thank God we did that.
Exactly.
Yeah, we spoke about the Tide Test and how, there could be so much more footage and so much more sort of celebration of the great game that there was. Another game that comes to mind from this World Cup is the semi-final in Lahore, which again is perhaps Australian cricket's one of their finest victories in Australian cricket history, because you go there playing Pakistan in their backyard, such a strong team, favorites to win a World Cup. And again, you hardly find like the full game anywhere. You can see, of course, bits and pieces of it. But what a tremendous win that must have been, and what a fillip to sort of go there and shock the crowd. I mean, there was silence right at the end of it.
Yes, yeah, it's unusual. I have 2 distinct memories. Was Stephen Waugh hitting 6s at the end of a one-day international, semi-final of the World Cup in icy silence, and apart from about 11 or 12 Australian cricketers jumping up and down saying, great shot, Stephen. And it's just silence hitting boundaries. When you think about the noise that is generated in most subcontinent grounds when sixes are being hit. And I think it was it Craig McDermott getting, was it Raja?
Ramesh Raja, yeah.
Early on, was it first ball?
Very early, yeah. They lost three quickly, yeah.
And taking that wicket in absolute silence as well. I mean, it's just quite extraordinary just how things stick in your memory. But normally that becomes like raucous noise when there's wickets taken or sixes hit. But this was a game where Pakistan expected to win, and we by then we'd sort of grown as a unit. Exponentially over the course of the journey to that point. So we fancied our chances the way we were playing our cricket at the time, and history shows we just sort of wore them down. Batting first, making a good score, and then our defending capabilities were very, very good at the time. So we defended that score and found ourselves in the final.
Let's not forget how badly sledged you were. Firstly, by the dear Zahir Abbas, who said you are nothing but a group of schoolboys. And and Imran said that he had assembled the greatest team ever in Test cricket or one-day cricket for this particular match. So, I mean, the verbal jousting leading into it, Imran distanced himself from Zahir's observations about schoolboys, which was probably diplomatically very sensible, perhaps led to his prime ministership in the end.
A great political career, yes.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, what a sledge that is. Were you very conscious of that, being going into it?
Not really, no. I've got to say, I mean, I can understand where Zahir's comments might have been. His English obviously wasn't his first language. I don't think he was as comfortable speaking in English as Imran, put it that way. But it might have been misconstrued as being, schoolboys or just young, inexperienced.
You're being very generous
along those lines, but that's a bit harsh. Being, schoolboys pitted against men. That's probably opened the door to sort of a bit of ridicule, isn't it? Which has subsequently happened. Going into those sort of games, you've got to respect that, but you don't get to the semi-final playing poorly, do you?
No,
you get to the semi-final because you're playing good cricket, and that's what we were doing. And you never underestimate an opponent in those sort of scenarios, because there's a reason they're there. It's because they're playing well, and so you've got to respect that. Even if you're red hot favourite, I think internally. And teams talk about it now. I mean, you never disrespect an opponent, do you? As the cricket team playing. One thing being a journalist or a past player, we can throw barbs from the cheap seats, but when you're right in the middle of it, you always have a very strong respect for your opponent.
And I think it's worth reminding, Sid, too, isn't it, that this was India versus Pakistan. The expectation was that they would be the finalists. It was the first World Cup to be played outside England, and it was being played under the banner of Cricket for Peace, which we tend to forget. But I mean, I think that was an incredibly significant initiative by the administrations then, given the restlessness of the world then. To have the dove as the symbol of peace. I mean, it sent a very strong message, particularly given the history of the two hosts. So I think we should always be mindful of that in any discussion about that World Cup.
Absolutely. And also that both the 1987 World Cup and the 1996 World Cup, which were jointly hosted by, India and Pakistan. 96, of course, had Sri Lanka as well. But, one can only... one can't assume when such an event might happen again, given the geopolitical situation between the two countries. And in 1996, they even went to the extent of having the final in Lahore, which, given the economics of the game, would probably never happen again, even if India and Pakistan were to jointly host it, because India would invariably host the final. So all these things are really interesting to think about, given the current context of cricket, isn't it? But one point I wanted to touch upon, Mike, talking about the relationship between the media and the players at that time. You mentioned in the book about how you didn't get on the flight from Lahore to Calcutta as the players did. So it so happened that you relied on AB and Bobby Simpson to give you some updates on what was going on in Calcutta while you were still in Lahore.
Well, it was tricky then. The team was rushed out immediately after the game, and Imran wasn't to be seen, by the way, either. Immediately after it, he went to ground in the dressing room, but they were rushed out, and I think via Bombay. Remarkably, I think it went Lahore, Bombay, back to Calcutta. I think a lot of promoters and officials that were seeing the two semi-finals were on that chartered flight. But the Fourth Estate, the members of the Fourth Estate weren't. We were left high and dry in Lahore, as usual, excess baggage, not required. And so what happened then was, of course, we had to file our stories. So we were dependent on AB and Simo. We had to ring them in wherever they were, either Bombay or in Calcutta. They got into Calcutta quite early, and we had to do all our dramatic scene-setting pieces with, of course, the byline from Mike Howard in Calcutta, of course, when we're in Lahore, in another country. But you know, I mean,
the earliest Zoom. They're the early days of Zoom.
Yeah.
We're talking to each other now, no problems whatsoever.
No.
Imagine if we had this back then.
Oh, how would that have been, eh? Could have had the exclusive interviews.
And AB could have even, taken videos of Eden Gardens and just messaged it to you, and you would have known exactly what everything was.
Yeah, it was a very, very different world, but we were very grateful for AB and for Simo to understand our circumstance and provide material so that we could at least convince our readers that we were with the team in Calcutta.
It was always good, Michael, to talk about something positive. We hadn't had a hell of a lot of positive things to talk about. So I was quite available to the media after you win things. About 3 years there, it was harder to get me.
Yeah, so the semi-final happens. Australia beat Pakistan, and all of India is thrilled because now the assumption is that India and Australia are going to play in the final. And then the next day, of course, India lose to England in Bombay, as it was then. And then there is gloom all over the subcontinent because what was supposed to be an India-Pakistan final ends up being an Ashes final now with England and Australia. But that doesn't stop the 100,000 or how many ever to get into the ground. And of course, Australia had all the support because England had beaten India, and Australia now had to win in Eden Gardens. How was that, AB? You spoke about the silence in Lahore, but then you get to Calcutta and you are the home team.
Oh yeah, like total reverse situation where 100,000 people in that ground. I'd say 99,000 at least going for Australia, at least.
Yeah.
And it was, the noise was just, it's hard to describe. I mean, you could be yelling things at someone who's, 10, 15 metres away from you and they couldn't hear you. There's a lot of sign language and stuff like this going on, particularly towards the end of that game. But yes, we were the underdogs, and I think the Indian population sort of took to us. So if India couldn't win, they wanted Australia to win against England, of course. So we were very well supported that particular day. It was just quite phenomenal. Right from the first ball, the crowd got behind us and gave us a huge lift, no question. And we played just a usual, type of game, where we like to, if we won the toss, we'd bat first, which was, a bit of a theme for us throughout that tournament, where we had a lot of luck with the toss. So we enjoyed batting first, good conditions, and our top order were playing very, very well. Boone, Marsh, Jones, fantastic three at the top there. Generally got us off to a bit of a good rollicking start, and then we'd build from there. So that particular day, a bit of extra pressure, tension, it gets to everyone, and we changed our game plan a little bit, where I do remember sending in what I'd call a pinch hitter. Craig McDermott, I told him pads on, and he went out there, and his job was just to go after the bowling as hard as he could right from the get-go. It sort of worked. I mean, you wouldn't say it was a runaway bestseller, but I think Craig got 14 or 15 off 7 or 8 balls, which is not cataclysmic type situation, but it just got a little bit of momentum going for us, and then the rest of the batting took over from there, and we ended up with a reasonable score, not a winning score, making 270, 280 in those days was a fantastic performance, but we only made 250 odd, I think.
253, yeah.
Is that the right 253?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't it was a good score, but not a runaway bestseller score, was it? It wasn't get the champagne on ice type stuff. We still had a lot of hard work to do from that point.
And you had a lot of hard work to do with the ball, AB. Before Shane Warne came along, of course, with the ball of the century, Mike Gatting's most famous dismissal was the reverse sweep of you in that World Cup final.
Yeah, well, I to this day, every time I see Michael, he crosses the road. If he sees me in the distance, he crosses the road because he knows what's coming. I've given him heaps over that for 30 plus years. And look, he has a bit of a laugh and a smile about it, but it must really burn him inside because he was playing so well. He was taking the game away from us almost single-handedly. Basically hit Tim May out of the attack, which is basically why I came on to bowl. I was coerced, I think, by Stephen Waugh, but I can't. Was a few of the boys, said, "Well, you're going to have a bowl skipper," and subsequently, I sort of thought, well, look, I've got to sort of change something. They might change the way they're batting because they won't want to get out to me. That was what I was sort of hoping might happen by me. I could sneak a couple of overs in and just see what happens. And I set a certain type of field, a very strong onside field. So Gat knew that I was going to try and bowl pretty tight into his legs. And so he was thinking, obviously, that there's runs to be had if I get the ball onto the offside here. I can, get boundary on the offside somewhere, or runs on the offside, because I had a very strong onside field. But so I'd say he'd have to have predetermined to play the reverse sweep. In those days, we hadn't seen much of the reverse sweep, but these days, I mean, if you don't have it in your armoury, you're not really a short form batsman, are you? But we hadn't seen the reverse sweep much. But of course, I tried to bowl it in as tight to Michael as possible, and in fact, it went probably this far. You can't probably see on the TV screen there, but it was probably, I wouldn't say a metre, but pretty close to a metre wide of leg stump. And of course, Michael trying to reverse sweep, he's got to reach a bit further, catches his glove onto his chest up in the air, and it's history now because my first ball in the game and get Michael Gatting out, and all of a sudden the momentum switches very quickly back into our favour. So it was a key moment in the game, me coming on to bowl and Michael playing that shot. He would regret to this day, but unfortunately that's history, isn't it? We're all, if you play long enough, you're a part of good things and a part of not so good. It's just the way it balances things out in this game.
You ended up bowling 7 overs, 3 more than May.
Yeah, well, I suppose once I'd got the wicket, I'm tempted to drag myself out of the attack, but of course the other blokes are saying, no, rubbish, bullshit, you got to stay on. So I end up bowling, a few more overs than I might have. I think I got another wicket too. From memory.
Downton, you got Paul Downton.
Yeah, well, it was actually not a bad track for me to bowl on. It was pretty slow, low, not bad for batting, but my little left arm skidders weren't the worst type of delivery on that sort of surface.
No.
It was only probably Lammy who whacked me a little bit, but other than that, it was a reasonable 7 overs, and then the bowlers came on and did a great job towards the end and got us over the line.
AB, you were short selling your bowling. I mean, you did have some good days. I think 7 wickets against West Indies in a Test match, if I'm not mistaken. So there were some good days with the ball too.
I suppose if I wasn't captain, I may have bowled some more overs. I probably should have. Most of the guys, it was a period, and probably up until the modern game, we all bowled in the nets. And not so prevalent now, where the guys don't spend as much time. If you're a batsman, you spend a lot of time hitting balls, against bowling machines or whatever it is.
Slingers.
But, yeah, that's right. But in those days, everyone bowled in the nets because the bowlers had bowled to the batsman and vice versa, and it was a good competitive sort of workout in the nets. So. You could throw the ball to anyone in a Test match sort of scenario, and they'd be able to land it. Jones or Boone or some of the guys who not renowned for their bowling at all, but could actually land it reasonably well. So that was a subtle difference, that we could all land them reasonably well without bowling absolute donkey drops sort of thing. So I probably should have bowled more when I think back of certain circumstances. I should have come on a bit more regularly, but that's I had enough trouble captaining and batting, let alone having to bowl as well. Have all the glory.
One of the stories of that World Cup, though, and I remember watching it too, and Mike mentions in his book too, was when you were defending a target, the importance of Stephen Waugh right at the end. I mean, he was known as the Iceman in that World Cup, and he used to invariably bowl at the depth and restrict and take wickets, and he was fantastic through that World Cup for you.
Yeah, I think slow but surely, we sort of started to get really definite roles and in a cricket team, and that can help. I mean, sometimes I think I like flexibility in one day cricket, being able to throw some of the ball at any given time in a game is ideal, or throw some into a batting scenario. But that particular team, the way we got very structured over a period of time there, probably over the previous 6 months and then the post World Cup for the next couple of years, we had a very set formula. Who would open the bowling and how many overs they'd bowl, etc., etc. And Stephen's role then became, very clear. He'd bowl 5 overs, probably, in the sort of early 20 type over mark, and then he'd bowl his right at the death. Those last 5 overs of any given defence of or any given one day game. That's how he got used, and he was just brilliant at doing that. He and Simon O'Donnell do a lot of great work together in the middle overs, and then particularly Steve at the end, the Iceman, because he was a skiddier, quicker bowl than people gave him credit for. I mean, if he hadn't had his shin problems, he would have bowled a lot more overs. So he developed these problems with his shins, so he couldn't bowl a lot. But certainly early on in his career, he was a very, very handy, skiddy, a lot quicker than he looked type bowler, and very accurate. So he did a great job for us.
Well, I mean, war was quite remarkable. I mean, the Australian selectors under Laurie Saul had taken big decisions about the future and invested heavily in War and McDermott and Boone at a certain time. And this was an immediate return for them through Steve, who had a remarkable temperament. I mean, the Iceman, I mean, Steve can be is a very competitive human being, can be very moody, but he's a brilliant reader of the game, a terrific cricket nous, and he really came to the fore then and gave great support to AB. My strongest memory of all, I think, is just the moment of triumph for the Australians. And I think I wrote, you could nearly see the frustration, disappointment and confusion that Allan AB had felt over the last 3 or 4 years, just leaving him. He was hoisted high by Dean Jones and Craig McDermott and someone else near the boundary as the fireworks were going off. It was an astonishing moment. And it was nearly for him a reward for all the hard work, the energy, the vision, the imagination, and putting up with so much trauma, both on and off the ground in that period in Australian cricket. And there's no doubt that while things went awry in Pakistan in 1988 for all sorts of reasons, mainly managerial incompetence, but aside from that, what happened in 86 and 87 was the birth of the new Australian team, the renaissance of Australian cricket under AB. And what happened in England in 89, to a large degree, which is seen as the great turning point, and it was, but a lot of the spirit, the discipline, and the passion was all born by the Australian teams in the subcontinent in 86 and 87. No doubt about that at all in my mind. That was where the foundation was laid for the greatness of the 89 side and on.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Michael. When you do think back about, is there turning points, and that's definitely that little period there where we got a bit more solidarity in selections for a start. So as you said, more of a pick and stick type scenario, which is a lot easier then to engender a culture and a spirit in a group of blokes where they're not looking over their shoulder all the time for the selectors' axe. That made a hell of a difference, getting that solid group together, and they're the best players in the country. So stick with them, and you'll get the rewards, and that's exactly what happened.
Do you remember that moment of being on the shoulders of McDermott and on Jones?
Yeah, yes.
And how you felt?
Yeah,
how did you feel?
As you say, the emotions were very high. I mean, obviously, I didn't sort of feel like it was a letting go of all the previous years of hard work, but certainly a very, very satisfying moment, and just with the crowd support, just the way the players revelled in a little bit of victory. It was we hadn't had a lot of that sort of emotion up until that point, so it was just a significant moment for the group, me personally, and the fact that England. We got together in the dressing rooms pretty much immediately after the game, and of course with a few quiet beers to be had between the two teams. A few shenanigans goes on, and but they were talk about good losers. That was the perfect sort of scenario in that. We'd won and it was all euphoric, and as you can imagine in our dressing room. But for the England boys to come in and be, as good as they were, and happy for us to have won the trophy was quite incredible. So just that all those scenarios, meant a hell of a lot.
And that continued Mike, back in the hotel too.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the camaraderie between the two teams was extraordinary. We'd played a lot of cricket against each other, so we knew each other, fairly well from late 70s to that point. We talk about Johnny Embry and Gat, Phil De Freitas, everyone in their team, Bill Athey, the whole group of them, Gucci, which I knew very, very well from my days at Essex. So just the camaraderie between the two teams was extraordinarily good.
And Mike, you do mention how large parts of Australia didn't even watch the second half of that game because there was a movie that was playing on it, wasn't it?
Don't get me started. Unfaithfully Yours with Dudley Moore and Natasha Kinski, I think. That took priority over the
runaway
second
bestseller, that one.
Oh, an absolute stunner! Yeah, it would have
Instead of
certainly
the World Cup final.
Oh, would have outrated a World Cup final, no doubt about that. No, yeah, that's the vision. I mean, it was there was a mentality for a long, long time, and it's only until television has changed, the attitude has changed. But it was very much India, Pakistan, out of sight, out of mind. And I mean, unfortunately, ABC was also culpable there with no radio. They did take the BBC feed of the World Cup final. I know that. But both in 86 and 87, I did voice reports and for the ABC to put into their bulletins, just 2-minute clips at the end of the day. So ABC even, that historically had always been the great promoter of Australian cricket with great pride. They weren't involved as well. The newspapers were in 86 and 87, as you'd remember, AB, it was a pretty big team, 8 or 10 people. The sense of excitement of, I think there was a sense that we could see what was happening, certainly after 86. So that was it. But yeah, it was very, very annoying for the Australian people to be deprived of that moment in the World Cup.
I wonder what it was. Any reason given that technically they couldn't get the pitches, or what was the?
No, they got the first innings all right. Innings all right.
Yeah,
but no, it was just a programming decision, believing that that it didn't have that much currency. I mean, if it had been, I don't know. It's inconceivable, particularly for Nine, because they really were. In fact, it was quite interesting when you talk to the Indian people in the streets and in the villages in those days, when they didn't talk about Australian television, they talked about Channel 9. That's what it was. That's what it was to them. They were seeing so much. It was Channel 9. So it was an inexplicable decision, just a very bad programming decision.
Yes.
Yeah.
And an insult to you and to and the rest of the team.
Well, yes. Thankfully, we do have some good footage of that game. Definitely more than what we have for the tight test and for the Lahore semi-final. So that's good. Mike, one thing about Pakistan, you brought up Pakistan in '88. And you have a whole chapter on that. I wanted to touch upon how, despite the fact that you were so close to the players and so close to the team, through your reports and through the book, you still have this dispassionate sense of being critical enough when you have to. You don't necessarily take their side. I mean, I say that because these days so much is about access, and players who know, journalists who know the players tend to not be too tough on them. And otherwise the players don't talk, and there's so much of dynamic there. But you seem to, at that time, have been able to, straddle the two comfortably, or at least what it comes through comfortably.
I think it was a different time, and I think there was greater respect for the media in those days. As tumultuous as it had been, I mean, let's be frank, everything changed after World Series. Everything changed. The way the game was reported, the thought about televised, and relationships as well. I think it was. I think the players in those days had a greater respect for the media than perhaps they do today. The one thing that irritates the media more than anything, and AB would know this, that those who were accessible, or inaccessible, I should say, inaccessible during their playing careers automatically want to become a part of the media when they retire. That makes the fourth estate pretty edgy, and that's why I always dip my lids to certainly to AB, certainly to Ian Chappell, certainly that's what David Hooks did. People when they were playing who respected our role, and same with Richie Benaud, that when you finished, or you should become a part of it. But it's those who were indifferent or rude, dismissive when they're playing, then expect to become a part of it, and do become a part of it, makes you pretty edgy. But in those days, we had a reasonable rapport. Not so much with management, mind you. Certainly in Pakistan in 1988, that was a very difficult tour. It was just difficult because they'd been forewarned about the need. This was after the Shakur Rana Gatting thing the previous year. Malcolm Gray had spoken to the team specifically about self-discipline and the diplomatic approach to a very critical tour. And then, unfortunately, the management of the 88 team, the late Colin Egar, who was a distinguished umpire himself, then took on Mahbub Shah and one thing and another very early in the first test when Tim May was deprived of an LBW against Javed Miandad. And it just went from bad to worse. Fortunately, in the end, the Australians stayed. They were competitive, and then, but it was an unpleasant time. AB, wasn't it? A very unpleasant time.
Yeah, it just sort of spiraled, out of nothing really. Unfortunately, with these things, I suppose there's a bit of frustration about, not getting the rub of the green with decisions, and then also it just sort of escalated to a point where it shouldn't have got to. But you talk about the relationships. Generally speaking, I think the players they understood that you can't get good media if you're not playing well. I mean, it's a simple scenario. If you deserve a bit of swisher on the media, I mean, we're all big enough boys to be able to cop that. And then if you do something good, well, you'll get good coverage. So let's do more good than bad. I mean, that's the relationship with the media from my early days was always pretty good. Yeah. We used to stay in the same hotels at times and share a drink in the bar, and it wasn't over the top, was it? You weren't best buddies getting rolling drunk with each other every other night. It was you meet on tour or whatever. You'd be in the bar, just have a bit of a chat, and then everyone would go their own ways from there. But it was a pretty good situation, wasn't it? Generally speaking,
yeah, it was.
Everyone got on pretty well, but it wasn't over the top matesy.
No,
was it? It was,
no.
Everyone knew their role. Okay, if you've done badly, you're going to cop a bit of swisher, and that's what happened. If you do well, conversely, but you'd still get in the bar and have a chat about it the next night.
Yeah, and I think that the respect, generally, overall respect was there for both parties. That the players respected the role that the journos had to play, and certainly the journos have terrific respect for the players. So both parties need each other for the game to prosper, and I think the bottom line is that they understand that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right, but overall, it was a good working relationship. Whether that's the same today, it's probably not, because of the media is a different beast these days. Even the players have got their own platforms.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's
I
how you
think the players
get your story out there now, don't you? You use your own platform to tell the world that you're going to get married, or tell the world that you're having a baby, or tell whatever. It's just the new. It's a different
another world.
Yeah, it's another world.
Yeah, if Australia's playing India and the TV channels are showing unfaithfully yours, you can just stream it live from wherever you are on your phone.
That's right. That's right. Yes, yes. You can access now to, well, everything and anything is quite extraordinary. Just through this thing, the telephone. It's an
absolutely.
extraordinary piece of equipment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So this has been wonderful. To wrap up, Mike, let me ask you. You covered all these tours back in the 80s when the profile of the India-Australia rivalry was just building. It was just growing. But of course, now it has grown to such a wonderful degree. And then you have the Border Gavaskar Trophy has become one of the, if not the, like iconic trophy in world cricket. We've had such wonderful series both in India and Australia. Great stories. You can start with the game where Australia enforced the follow-on, and then Lakshman and Harbhajan won the game for India, and then so many others as recent as 2021 with the Gabba victory when India won the series at the Gabba. How pleased are you to see the growth of this rivalry and to see that it is now perhaps the preeminent trophy in Test cricket?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I think it's wonderful. It's a wonderful credit. I'm delighted that AB and Gavaskar have the trophy named after them for what they've done. Even if Sonny's not quite as enthusiastic about the Australian as a cricketer as he might be of some others, we love him nonetheless. What is so important is that this is what the Maharaja Patiala and Frank Tarrant in particular envisioned in 1935-36. Tarrant could see clearly what India was capable of. And others going through it over the period, I think Benno saw it as well in the 50s. And certainly going up into the 70s, I don't know, I never really talked to Bill Lawry much about it, whether he could see what was likely to happen. But certainly from AB's generation on, it was patently clear that India was going to become so incredibly powerful. I mean, I think the population of India at the time of writing was about 850 million. So it's gone well past that over the last 35, 36 years, past the billion mark. So obviously, and it was always going to happen with the right support, the right sponsorship, the amount of money circulating in the game. It's just whether India will accept a greater responsibility for the traditional game as well as the short form. Clearly the IPL has changed everything, and now we see that the UAE IPL is about to start, or whatever they're going to call it. We see the short form leagues all around the world. And for those of us who are breastfed and love Test match cricket and believe in it implicitly and believe that cricketers are rated by what they achieve in the traditional arena. That's how you judge a great cricketer, is what they've done in the traditional arena. And you just wonder whether the game, as good as it is, the traditional game, can withstand the relentless charge of short form cricket. That's to be determined in the future. But, the importance of what we're talking about today and what the Australians have achieved is that we are respecting and responding to a great moment in history. We're not devaluing the past. We're highlighting the past. We're not dismissing history. We're highlighting history. And that's something for the traditional game to survive. That's what we've got to do. Otherwise, it'll sink under the sheer weight of the short form stuff, and which we can't remember. I mean, who can remember, when they're playing in a World Cup? Yes, a World Cup, you're playing for something that is significant in the 50 over game. And perhaps you might argue it in the T20 world, or whatever they call it now. I don't think it's the World Cup, it's the World T20 or something like that. You might, at a stretch, be able to argue that now means something. But, this is what the traditional game has to be able to withstand, is this sheer weight of short form cricket, because it doesn't offer to the true lover of the game what the traditional game has always offered.
Absolutely. And AB, does it still sometimes give you a bit of disbelief when you say the Border Gavaskar Trophy, or when you're commentating or when you're awarding the Border Gavaskar Trophy to the winner?
Definitely. It's like it's another person. Something. Yeah, it's a huge honour, of course, and the rivalry between Border and Gavaskar is alive and well to this day. I mean, I get phone calls occasionally from Mr. Gavaskar just out of the blue about varying subjects that are happening in the world of cricket. But both of us are, I think, still strong advocates for Test match cricket being the preeminent game. And I think in recent times it's shown that the series played between Australia and India, Test cricket-wise, quite extraordinarily successful because the cricket played, the relationship between the teams, they get on well, but they don't, if you know what I mean. There's always that clash of culture, which adds a little bit of spice to the whole scenario, and that it's almost impossible to recreate that in the shorter form of the game. It just, the game doesn't last long enough for all those things to sort of bubble to the surface. And Test match cricket, as far as I can tell, between Australia and India, is still alive and well and sought after, and the players want to play each other in Test cricket. They do play a plethora of short form cricket now against each other, sometimes with each other in very franchises around the place. But I still think, from an Australian cricket point of view, I know, but I'm sure, I've listened to Virat Kohli talk about his passion for 5-day cricket. Is still alive and well, and while the Indian captain is saying things like that, well, it's I rest a little bit easier, but I am worried, like you, Michael, about where it's all heading. Who will survive? Maybe Australia, England, India, Pakistan. How many other countries are going to continue playing Test cricket? That's the worry.
Well, yeah, that's the question for the future, and we'll wait and see what happens to Test cricket and the Border Gavaskar Trophy and everything else. But one thing I can assure you is that Cricket Beyond the Bazaar will survive. It will continue to be available. You can read about Australia's visits to India and Pakistan in the 80s, about AB's heroics and all the other great games, and the triumphs and disappointments and everything else in between. Thank you so much, AB and Mike, for joining. This is a really special podcast, and it was a privilege to have both of you on the show.
Well, thank you, Sid. It's been a delight as ever, and it's always great to see AB.
No, I've enjoyed it. Just reminiscing about some great times, and well done again, Michael, on what you've achieved with that particular book, and it's still relevant to this day. So that's must make you feel pretty proud of what you put together there.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, and it'll be fun to put it in front of a generation who didn't understand what you went through, what we went through. So it's important that it's going to be read again, which is great fun.
Excellent news.
Absolutely. And I think the book will also inform readers about the challenges of journalism and touring at that time. Mike has some wonderful bits about the challenges of wiring a copy from remote parts of India to Australia, and all the tricks that he had to accomplish to do that. So there's a lot of really, really interesting bits. There's a bit about AB going on a midnight horse ride also. I won't give away too much, but there is some fun bits there. So please pick it up. I'll put the link to it. And thank you so much for joining. You can subscribe to our podcast on all the podcast applications. You can visit our website at 81allout.com. Please leave a rating and a review. It really helps us to, for more people to find us. And we'll join you next time for another new episode. Thank you so much.
India have won the series.
They're going to get back for two. India home. Lords goes wide.